But also, I found it very interesting what you said about whoever should observe future ceasefire, part of with a political agreement, that that it would be better for to be more involvement of China in the global south because I can't imagine a scenario where the ceasefire is broken and the Europeans who observe it would then say, "Oh, yeah, the Ukrainian side did it." It would be very, this is a proxy war, they're party to the conflict. But also, the Russians have said they don't really care much what the Europeans think of them, but they do care a lot about China. They care a lot about India, Africa, and the global south. So that is a good point.
This is very important because we are not in a bilateral negotiation. People forget that completely. People think that this is somehow a bilateral negotiation between Russia and Ukraine. It's nothing of the sort. We are in a completely interconnected world where this war impacts the entire world and where Russia has global interests. The United States has global interests. Europe has global interests. If you vulgarly cheat on an agreement that you've made to the whole world through the UN and specifically the UN Security Council, the consequences are quite different from what you would have in a bilateral situation where one side cheats on the other, but there's no recourse to third parties. This is the idea, by the way, of law itself, that you don't have vendettas and revenge matches between two sides. You multilateralize it. You put it in a context where there are broader interests at stake. This is very, very basic. It's a very basic concept of diplomacy. Treaties are not bilateral documents if they're properly drawn, and flagrant violations of treaties that are agreed and systematically monitored and well designed impose high costs on the violators. And so the idea that is very often stated in Europe these days, well, we could agree on something, but then Putin will just cheat and continue, is extraordinarily uh, extraordinarily naive. And by the way, since everything in discourse goes back to someone's historical example and typically to Munich in the fall of 1938, it should be said very explicitly that that agreement that was reached between Hitler and Chamberlain, when Hitler vulgarly violated it, soon afterwards had massive repercussions against Germany, including the massive accelerated rearmament of Britain, including uniting much of the world against Hitler, including exposing Hitler to the lies, including the ability of the United States to enter into many agreements even before entering into the war itself in December 1941, including enabling Churchill to face down those who would compromise with Hitler in May of 1940 by saying Hitler cannot be trusted to make an agreement. So even the most famous case that Europeans look to of saying we can't deal with the other side, Munich 1938, appeasement of Hitler, historians that are serious historians know that, first of all, Hitler uh, felt that he had been tricked into that agreement because it did expose his hand. It did change his timing. It did weaken his position. It did lead ultimately to his defeat. That's not the history we tell now. The history that is told in the tabloids is never negotiate with the other side. Well, I would say two things. One, this is not Munich 1938. There's none of the preceding history. There's none of the contextual situation. The whole analogy is pathetically weak. And we've been making that phony analogy through every war the United States has been in for 50 years, whether it's Iraq or whether it's any other place. So it's false. But even if it were a serious analogy, it's a completely misunderstood historical event. And so I would just say my bottom line is treaties are important. They can work. They need to be properly drafted. They need to be properly monitored. They need to be understood for what they are, which is to multilateralize a crisis, not to bilateralize an ongoing crisis.